Pete, just finally here, it's the final day of campaigning for The Voice today, Pete. I mean, people's focus has well and truly been on Israel this week. But regardless, 24 hours to go before, most Australians hit the polls tomorrow. Give us an idea of where your head's at this morning with how you think your campaign's gone.
Well, Peter, we've conducted the campaign in a respectful way. I asked the Prime Minister 15 questions in January of this year. Still no response to that letter. There are millions of Australians who will be voting against it, will be voting no tomorrow, including 4 or 5 out of 10 Labor voters, because they just don't have the detail and they don't trust the Prime Minister to be across the detail. The detail's been deliberately withheld, and how can you vote for something that's not properly explained? The design of The Voice starts on Monday. Why didn't it start 6 months ago so that people could be properly informed? And I think it's without precedent. We haven't had a constitutional convention. In the end, this thing is permanent, it's divisive, and it hasn't been properly explained to Australians, and it's not going to provide the practical outcomes that we want to see for all Indigenous Australians.
Just finally, the leading Yes campaigner, Noel Pearson, some of these comments have been picked up in the AFR this morning. He feels that Yes is headed for defeat, but he says Australia is, quote, a hard country now and nothing seems to persuade white Australians that the Constitution does not entirely belong to them. What do you make of comments like that?
Well, I just reject it, and I think a lot of those comments along the way, the comments of Ray Martin and other people that have talked about people being hard-hearted or racist, as I say, you're talking about now 4 or 5 out of 10 Labor voters who are voting no. So I think it's counterproductive, and I think, to be honest, they've driven people to a decision to vote no based on that sort of lecturing and hectoring and the pious announcements and words of some of the elites in this country. It doesn't wash, and it doesn't persuade people. Australians had their hearts won at the start when the announcement was made that there was going to be something to help Indigenous Australians. 65% of people supported that. Now, the Prime Minister has turned that into something like 35 or 45%. We'll wait to see what happens on the weekend. But it's obvious that millions of Australians haven't been convinced by the words of Noel Pearson or others. The Prime Minister, Linda Burney, and others have failed to carry people's minds. They've won the hearts, they've lost the minds because they've kept the detail from Australians who are curious. They want to know how it can help, but the way in which these broad words would be interpreted by the High Court make it a very dangerous proposition. You're talking about insertion of a new chapter into the Constitution which gives it equivalence with the High Court. It would be a very, very significant change, the most significant proposed since our nation's rule book was designed at the time of the Federation, and that's why the government finds itself in the position it is now. Families are struggling to pay their power bills with the policies of this government, and there's a lot of pressure on families and small businesses right around the country, and I think the Prime Minister's got to get back to those priorities. He's been obsessed with The Voice for the last 16 or 17 months, and I think he's lost the faith of a lot of Australians.
OK, Peter Dutton, the Opposition Leader, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for joining us.